A man covered in blood staggers across a snowy forest with an axe in hand and drops lifeless into a stream. As per the legend, an English settlement in Deerfield, Massachusetts, was attacked by French and indigenous forces at the turn of the 18th century. A peaceful mixed-race tribe, which was known to have special immunity to diseases brought to the New World, was freed during the raid by rebel forces. They were known as the Sinchani, the witchcraft-using followers of the secretive sect known as Atlanto, who were banished, vowed to destroy the Sinchani bloodline. Locals have long since reported strange paranormal events that remain unexplained to this day. This strange legacy still exists around Christmas time. 1995, when a young boy and girl called William and Emerson wander through the snow-covered woodland. Whispering voices lure Will to some sort of an altar. He digs around it to find an arrowhead, but he drops it as soon as his sister, Emerson, sees him. They return home, where Emerson finds a man sneaking around, and he asks her to shush. She gifts Will the same rock he dug out earlier as a Christmas present, and he looks quite stunned. The day following Christmas, a detective and a Child Protection Services officer interview Will's grandfather, Mr. Francis Stark, about the previous night's events. They are baffled to find out that little Will walked 10 miles through the dense forest to his grandpa's house and was reportedly dropped off by a native man. The detective asks the old man if he has any clue what happened at his son's home that night. The 10-year-old Will hides in a closet, and when they force him out, he refuses to speak, screaming and thrashing his arms. Cut to present-day Deerfield. A realtor waits for the late Mr. Herman Stark's son to collect his things so she can show the house that's been put up for listing. The son, Will, is an insomniac tow truck driver. He is pestered by a lawyer to come to pick up his father's ashes. She informs him that his family home was placed in foreclosure after the bank tried to recover some delinquent mortgage payments. It's been years since he last spoke to his father, who had been admitted to mental health clinics over the past 10 years for schizophrenia, psychotic episodes, and multiple personality disorder, and was unable to pay off the bills. She reminds him that nobody is ready to buy the house because it's no secret what had taken place there. So she transfers the ownership to him, as it was also where his father wanted his ashes to be scattered. He returns to his old home and looks around the rooms. Some of the lights don't work, so he tries fixing the fuse, then locks up the underground cellar and goes to sleep. He finds himself hallucinating that his dog keeps barking at a window opening by itself, and a man suddenly appears behind him. He snaps out of it, but the window is actually open. Ava Donovan is a teenager who has just moved into town with her mom, Detective Carrie Donovan. At a car accident scene, Carrie meets a homicide detective named Drew Carter, who informs her that the car belongs to Brittany O'Shea, who has been missing since last month and whose daughter was found murdered. They think she is on the run. Will comes to tow the car away. Will finds his mother's piano in his dad's old accounting office. His dad believed it to be out of order. The following night, the window opens again, and Will's dog, Meadow, is missing. He goes out looking for her. In the living room, he reminisces about Christmas night that year when his sister gifted him the arrowhead. His father had been out towing all night. Little Will sits still, frozen at the sight of his sister eating something bloody. He shakes it off and continues to look for his dog in the basement. The cellar door is open, and the chain he locked it with is dropped on the floor. His candle goes out, and someone whispers, "Who are you?" The lights flicker on and off, and he sees a girl child standing in front of a mirror. It's his sister. She traces a circle around her in white chalk and continues to do ballet, asking him about the gift she gave him, claiming they followed her home. Before Will could get a clear answer on what she means, he sees a blur of a man's bloody face, and suddenly he wakes up back in his room. He goes outside looking for Meadow again, and hears his sister whisper that she's watching him. He notices a toy elephant hanging from a tree. The next morning, Will puts his dog's food in bed outside, hoping she returns. The two detectives meet and Drew alerts them that a female body has been found nearby. He also mentions his first case of a possible body, when a man had jumped from a bridge and had survived the fall, but froze before they found him. They find Brittany's body, cold as ice, with an hourglass-like mark on her back, carved in the flesh. Will puts up missing dog posters, and while he is at work, he feels a strong painful sensation and discovers teeth-like scars on his body. His co-worker believes they are animal bite marks. Carrie finds a match for the hourglass mark on Brittany, and correlates them to the Stark-Cotter murders. At night, Will hears the piano playing, and goes to the old accounting office to find his mother playing it. She tells him to return it to its rightful home before it's too late, and disappears, leaving behind a photo of his father, grandfather, and aunt. The two detectives find the case linked to William, as he was the only witness of his mother and sister's murders. Drew goes to find Will and starts questioning him, assuming he knew Brittany O'Shea, and he did. Will claims to have lost touch with her, not knowing of her whereabouts, but Drew keeps pushing it. They retrieve the Stark murder case files and begin to search for clues. Carrie watches tape recordings of detectives pleading with Mr. Herman to pull himself together and recall where his son is. In the next recording, Will sits with his elephant toy as the detectives try to get him to answer how he walked miles through the snow and who was the man he was with. He stays silent, but when the detectives leave, he looks up to the camera and says Atlanto. Will follows weird noises and his sister's shadow to find his dog, Meadow. She does not seem welcoming, so he sits at a distance and talks to her like old times. He mentions incoherent information about his father, his side of the family, the prophecy and medication that he was too young to take, and the voices who want him to build it, and suddenly he passes out, unable to breathe. His co-worker offers him some time off. At home, he feels like he saw his aunt, but she's not there when he comes out. Carrie conveys the newfound information to Drew. Atlanto means the spirit of the ancestors in Mohican, and she mentions that Will's grandfather had reported seeing a native man drop him off. What bothers her is that Will's bloody pajamas were missing from the evidence after a woman came by with fresh clothes. Going back to their current murder case, Drew says that Brittany's scar is a symbol that signifies the afterlife, and he's waiting for her toxicology report. Carrie sneaks into Will's house, and suddenly his old bloody pajamas fall into a laundry basket. As she collects them into a bag, she feels a presence. She walks to a mirror and watches her reflection get strangled weirdly. She tries to run out through the cellar door, but something keeps pulling her back. She manages to make it back to her car. In a flashback, we see Emerson carry a jar of jam to the stranger hiding in a shed, wishing him a Merry Christmas. The bearded stanger peeks at Herman walking around and talking to himself. He hears someone outside and thinks it's the little girl again and goes out, but sees a masked native who plans to eliminate the mother and daughter to retrieve the endowment. And in a second, something possesses him. He enters the house, and Will follows him as his mother screams from a room. The native man reveals his face, and it turns out to be Will's aunt. As Will recalls this, he hears the native man's voice say that Will knows who he is. Detective Donovan comes back home to Ava's babysitter in her room. The babysitter is Will's aunt. Ava hides in a closet and tells her mother that her ballerina friend bit her finger. The detectives discuss the suspected culprit of the decade-old murder. Wayne Cotter was the bearded man who was lost in the Deerfield trails, starving and freezing, and he decided to hide in sheds near the Stark house after Herman sent him on his way with a loaf of bread. His DNA was found only on the jar in the shed. After the murder, he was found frozen miles from the house, with the same markings on him as Brittany O'Shea. They do not understand how a frail, crippled 70-year-old man could have gotten himself on a 20-feet-high beam. They suspect a paranormal entity is involved. Detective Donovan examines the bloody pajamas with the arrowhead in them, and a notebook full of drawings she found in Brittany O'Shea's car. She figures out a code, but does not understand what it means. Will is seen painting a cloth, and then painting a black handprint across his face. The Native American hand symbol painted on the face meant that the warrior was successful in a hand-to-hand battle. The native man behind him orders Will to bring the mother and daughter of this bloodline. The detectives further the investigation, finding out Brittany had an inseparable bond with a young Will, and they had later kept in touch through letters with tribal-type drawings on them. We also learn that Drew is actually Ava's father, and we see the masked native at his house. Detective Carrie goes out to meet a man through the code that she assumes are coordinates. His name is Solomon, and he has lost his mother and daughter too, as they were taken from him. He further explains that centuries ago when the colonizers conquered the shores, a plethora of diseases wiped out all except for the Sinchani tribe, his ancestors. The settlers feared the tribe and were set to destroy them. The settlers secretly worshipped Atlanto, the spirit of the afterlife who destroyed the indigenous tribe. Brittany had set out to visit this man, to ask for help to protect her daughter from those who have summoned Atlanto to destroy the mothers and sisters of the generations, so as to end the bloodline. He asks Carrie if she knows her heritage. The detectives arrive at Will's house. Carrie is looking at the painted clothes, and Drew is lured into the cellar by the little girl's voice and gets trapped there. Carrie finds herself in one of the paintings. They both manage to get out in time to stop Will from harming a random kid with an axe. He says Carrie has something of theirs, which they want back. He also mimics an arrow shot towards her, and she rushes to search for her daughter, alarmed. Ava follows someone carrying the arrowhead. Carrie panics as she realizes they are the next mother and daughter target. Ava gets on an old bus, looking for her ballerina friend Grace. She finds an elephant toy, and Grace shows up suddenly, trying to take Ava to her house, but Ava runs away from her after she starts acting strange. Solomon finds her and takes the arrowhead from her, and she finds her mom and dad. Solomon finds Will doing a ritual, as Atlanto commands him to fulfill the covenant. Solomon performs a ritual himself, and calls upon his ancestors for help. We learn that he had dispelled Atlanto once before, as he saved Will from a possessed Cotter. He was the man who had dropped Will off at his grandfather's house. After Atlanto leaves his body, he carries Will out safely, and gives him indigenous medicine to drink and puts the arrowhead in a necklace. He forces Will to snap out of it, not letting his memories influence him anymore. Will wakes up in the snow, with Meadow beside him. Solomon buries the arrowhead at the same altar as before, and puts a ritualistic spell on it. Will moves out and decides to go on a road trip. Carrie hands him Brittany's notebook, with the drawings they had shared. She says that she's there to hear out the truth from his side, whenever he's ready. The story ends here, although many mysteries related to these cases remain uncovered.